Hello everyone, my name's Daria, welcome back to my channel Full of Lit, and today I want to talk to you guys about my most anticipated releases of 2021. So I, for some unknown and entirely unnecessary reason, have decided to talk to you guys about 35 books. I've divvied up this list based on genre, and I have timestamps, so if you want to skip to a certain genre that you are interested in, you can go ahead and do that. So without any further ado, let's get into the list. The first genre we're going to be covering, incidentally the largest genre represented on this list, is YA contemporary / romance. And the first book I want to talk to you guys about is How Moon Fuentes Fell in Love with the Universe. This book follows a young woman named Moon who has always felt less desirable than her twin sister, and she's kind of accepted this background role to her sister starring one. And then Moon gets a job on this tour bus, and she meets a guy named Santiago, whom at first she doesn't really have warm feelings towards. But then, as she gets to know Santiago more and starts to discover more about herself through this job, she starts to learn that maybe she's not comfortable living in the shadows anymore, and she wants to step into the light and shine. The next book I have to mention is An Emotion of Great Delight, and I cannot explain how excited I am for this book. I read Tahereh Mafi's first contemporary novel, A Very Large Expanse of Sea, this year, and fell in love with it. This book is set in the early 2000s, right after the United States declared war on Iraq. Our main character Shadi is dealing with a lot of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim rhetoric. Her family is also going through a lot of hard times. Her brother has died, her father is in the midst of dying, her mother is falling apart. And to top it all off, Shadi is dealing with immense heartbreak. So yes, this book is going to be painful, and I, for one, cannot wait. The next book is Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. This book follows two young women, Hani, who is very popular and well-liked, but when she comes out to her friends as bisexual, they sort of invalidate her sexuality. They basically tell her that she can't be bisexual because she's only dated guys, and in the heat of the moment, Hani tells them that actually she is dating a girl named Ishu. Now, Ishu is the complete opposite of Hani. She's very academically focused, and she wants to become head girl of their school. So the two girls strike up a deal. They're going to fake date, one of my favorite tropes to ever exist. Ishu will cover for Hani, and Hani will help Ishu become head girl. And of course, like all fake dating scenarios go, maybe some real feelings become involved. The next book is May the Best Man Win, and this book follows Jeremy, who recently came out as transgender. Jeremy kind of wants to show up all the naysayers and bigots at his school, and so he decides to run for homecoming king. And he just so happens to be running against his ex-boyfriend, Lucas. And now Lucas is kind of going through a rough time of his own, and he is not going to back down either. So the two boys are battling it out for the title, and of course, some sneaky feelings are still lingering between them. The next YA contemporary romance I want to share with you all is Counting Down with You. This book follows Karina, who is a Bangladeshi American teen, and she keeps her head down, she studies, she doesn't make a fuss. Her parents end up going to Bangladesh for a month and they leave her behind, and during that time, a rumor starts to fly that she is dating Ace Clyde, the resident bad boy. Now it turns out that Ace actually started this rumor himself and told everyone that Karina is his girlfriend. And he desperately wants Karina to go along with this ploy. He offers even to buy her books every single week, which I don't know about you guys, but I would say yes. So Karina agrees, but the charade has to be done the second her parents get home. Once again, we have the fake dating trope, and once again, I'm sure that real feelings will become involved, and I cannot wait to see it. The next book is actually a collection of short stories entitled Everyone Dies Famous in a Small Town. The Goodreads summary for this book is very vague. It essentially follows a number of teenagers, all from small towns all across the country. It is said to deal with the mundane, everyday lives of teenagers, and also talks about grief, trauma, female rage, all things that I love to see in my literature. So I am very intrigued by this, mostly because I'm just not really sure what it's about. The next book I have to share with you guys is She's Too Pretty to Burn, which is a YA thriller inspired by The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I actually just read this year for the first time. I don't know how the hell that happened. How had I not read it before? But anyway, it was the first time that I read it, and I loved it. So that's already points in favor of this book. The summary, once again, is pretty vague. It follows two girls, Veronica and Nico. They're two best friends, they're both really creative people, and Veronica ends up falling in love and falling hard that summer. And then there is one night that completely changes everything with these girls. There's fires, there's murder, there's stalkers. I don't know who sets the fire, who does the stalking, who kills, I don't know anything, but I am excited to find out. The next book that I absolutely cannot wait for is Fat Chance Charlie Vega, and I am absolutely astonished and in awe of this cover. So this book follows the aforementioned Charlie Vega, who is constantly put down and belittled because of her weight. Her mother is constantly pushing her to go on all these fad diets. Charlie has a really great best friend named Amelia who is always supportive of her. She's the exact opposite of Charlie. She's thin, she's popular, and when Charlie is asked out on a date by her classmate Brian, she is very disheartened to learn that Brian actually asked out Amelia first. So this book leans more towards coming of age and self-discovery more so than I would say romance, but either way, I can't wait for it. The next book I have to share with you guys is Happily Ever Afters. Once again, we have an absolutely gorgeous cover in front of us. This book follows Tessa Johnson, who has always loved romance novels and even wants to write some of her own. But she's only ever shared her work with her best friend Caroline, and then she gets accepted into this very prestigious creative writing program. Unfortunately for Tessa, when she gets to the program, she has a massive case of writer's block and doesn't know what to write. But luckily, Caroline is there with a solution. She has a long list inspired by many a romance novel, all about steps to getting your perfect happily ever after. And Tessa just needs to follow the list and she'll be inspired to write. Now Tessa has her eye on the broody Nico as kind of the Prince Charming of her story, but she is starting to develop really strong feelings and a close bond with a sweet, quiet boy named Sam. So now she has to figure out exactly which happily ever after she wants for herself. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is One of the Good Ones. This book follows a young girl named Happy, whose sister died mysteriously at a social justice rally. And Kezi, Happy's sister who died, is being immortalized by the movement and her activist groups as this sort of perfect angelic figure. One of the good ones, as the title says. And for Happy and her other sister Jenny, this just doesn't sit right with them. Why is it that Kezi must be seen as this angelic, flawless individual in order to be deemed worthy? And then matters become even more complicated when a secret about how Kezi died is revealed. The next book that I absolutely cannot wait to read is Roman and Jewel. This book follows a young black girl named Jersey who really wanted to land the lead role in a hip-opera called Roman and Jewel. Now this musical is kind of like Hamilton in the way that it took Shakespeare's original work and kind of puts a hip-hop musical spin on it. So Jersey really wanted that lead role of Jewel, but it went to another girl instead. Jersey ends up as an understudy, and in case matters couldn't get any worse, she starts to fall in love with the male lead, Zeppelin. And of course, because Jersey can't catch a break, the girl who landed the Jewel role, her name's Cindy, also likes Zeppelin. So things are a bit of a mess, and then they get even more complicated when a viral video gets put out of Jersey and Zeppelin in the two roles. And suddenly, everyone and their mother has an opinion on whether or not Jersey or Cindy should be playing the lead role. The next book I want to talk to you guys is If I Tell You the Truth, and this book is made up of prose, poetry, and even some illustrations as well. This book follows two different women and their different experiences and lifetimes. We have Kiran, who had to run away from her home of Punjab after her fiance's brother raped her. Absolutely no one believed her or supported her, so she went to Canada to live there undocumented. She gives birth to a daughter, and then we follow this daughter, Sahara, in her life. Now we enter Sahara's story at a time when her mother is being threatened to be deported. And it is at this point when Kiran tells Sahara about the truth of how she came to be. And Sahara is encouraging her mother to tell the truth about what this man did to her. But he has become a very prominent political figure in Punjab. We're touching on a lot of sensitive and triggering material, but from the reviews that I've seen, it was apparently handled seamlessly and beautifully, and I'm really interested by this sort of mixing of different modes of writing. So the next genre we're going to be taking a look at is YA fantasy, and I'm going to start off with a few pretty obvious choices for this list. First, we have The Rule of Wolves, the second book in the King of Scars duology, and what seems to be the last book that Leigh Bardugo will be writing in the Grishaverse for quite some time. I don't want to really give a synopsis of this book because if I do, it would spoil King of Scars for those of you who haven't read it, which there shouldn't be any of you. If any of you have not read King of Scars by now, then I'm just gonna assume that you were in a medically induced coma ever since it's been out. Because that's the only explanation for not having read it. I cannot express to you just how excited I am for this book, to find out what happened to Zoya and Nikolai. They are my favorite Grishaverse ship. I know that that's probably not a popular opinion, but it's my opinion. I definitely plan on doing a reading vlog when this book comes out. I honestly can't even talk about this book without getting, like, sweaty. The next book I cannot wait for is A Court of Silver Flames, the fourth book in the ACOTAR series / world. The cover is hideous. but I'm sure that the insides will be gorgeous. It has to be, because it is about Cassian and Nesta, my babies. I know that there are quite a few people who don't like Nesta, but you know what? You're just wrong. You're wrong. I don't know what else to say to you. I absolutely cannot wait for this book. We have all been waiting far too long. It's time for the wait to be over. It is time for Sarah J. Maas to feed us. The next book I desperately want to get my hands on is Chain of Iron, the second book in the Last Hours trilogy. I was very hesitant when Chain of Gold first came out. Everyone was praising it so much I thought there was no way it could live up to the hype. And as soon as I read the first 100 pages of that book, nay, the second that I finished the first chapter, I went out and I put my clown makeup on. Because Chain of Gold was fan-fucking-tastic. I absolutely adored the book. I loved every single character except for Grace and Charles. They can get fucked. But everyone else, I just loved. And I can't wait to see what happens to them in this book. The next book I have to share with you guys is In Deeper Waters, which is about gay pirates. Gays on the water. Gay pirates. Ah! So this book follows Prince Tal, who is finally able to step out into the world after being hidden for so long due to his secret magical ability. He is just about to set sail and journey around his kingdom when he and his crew discover a person who shouldn't be on the ship. It is a mysterious prisoner, and Tal decides to bring this kid along. The stowaway is actually a mysterious prisoner named Athlin, who Tal starts to take a liking to. And then something horrible happens. Athlin jumps overboard, and Tal is super heartbroken and thinks that he'll never see him again. But Lady Luck is smiling down on Tal because a few days later, he runs into Athlin again. Except now, Tal is the one who is being taken prisoner by a bunch of pirates, and the only person who can save him is Athlin. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is Sisters of the Snake, and the synopsis for this book is pretty vague. It essentially follows two young girls, the Princess Rani, who is sort of kept in her castle and not really allowed to explore or do anything for herself. And then there's Rhea, who is very street smart. She's just trying to get by day, and she does this by stealing things. The two end up meeting and are absolutely shocked because for some reason, they look identical. The Goodreads synopsis says that they strike a deal, and I imagine that deal is that they switch places. But other than that, there's really nothing else to go on. The final YA fantasy I want to put on all of your radars is A Dark and Hollow Star. I'm gonna say 2 words, just 2 words, and I have a feeling you're going to want to read this book, and those words are gays and fays. Huh? Are you intrigued or are you intrigued? Really, that's all that I can say about this book. I've read the Goodreads summary so many times and I'm still confused. This book follows a fairy world that essentially exists within our own normal world. The fairies essentially have this rule that you cannot harm any humans for any reason. But then the rule is of course broken, and a number of murders have sort of rocked the entire fae world in Toronto. So then 4 queer teens sort of band together to figure out who's committing these murders and stop them. I love it. I absolutely love it. I cannot wait to read it. So many good books in 2021. So many good books! So now we have ventured into the adult thriller portion of this video, and the first book I want to talk to you guys about is The Other Black Girl. This book follows Nella, who is getting really sick and tired of being the only black person working at her publishing company. And then another of events transpire in the office that elevates Hazel to the new office darling and sort of leaves Nella in the shadows. And then a note is left on Nella's desk telling her to leave the company. Now Nella automatically thinks that this must be Hazel's doing, and she starts to become very paranoid and is seeing sinister intentions and actions everywhere she looks. This book is described as a social thriller and has actually been compared to Jordan Peele's Get Out. The next thriller I want to talk to you guys about today is The Good Sister. So this book follows 2 twins, Rose and Fern. Now Rose is the more responsible of the two, and she's always protected Fern throughout their lives. Now you find out that their mother was apparently a sociopath, and Rose often had to protect Fern from her. And there's a big secret looming between the 2 sisters, something bad that Fern did many, many years ago. Now in the present, Rose is dealing with some fertility issues, and so she asks Fern to have her baby for her. However, Rose starts to become suspicious of Fern and what her intentions are for this child, and then that secret, or really all the secrets between them, come bubbling to the surface. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is Dial A for Aunties, and I wasn't sure whether I should put this in the romance category or the mystery category, but I just decided to put it here. So this book follows Madeline Chan, who ends up accidentally killing her blind date. We've all been there, am I right, ladies? And then things get even more out of control when her mother calls up all of her aunts to help her get rid of the body. And then things somehow go from worse to worser when the body gets accidentally shipped in a cake cooler to a wedding that all of them had been planning. So obviously the situation is a bit chaotic, and then things get even more complicated when Madeline's long-lost love from college shows up at the wedding. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but this book sounds like so much damn fun. The next book I want to share with you all is Quiet in Her Bones. This book is set in a very affluent neighborhood, and many years ago a woman named Nina disappeared, and a lot of people thought that she just left her husband. But then her bones are discovered in the forest near the neighborhood. Now Nina's son is absolutely determined to figure out what happened to her, because the night of her disappearance, he remembers hearing a scream. But it's going to be a little bit hard for him to gain any information when he's surrounded by so many rich, secretive people. The next book I desperately want to get my hands on is Survive the Night. I've read some of Riley Sager's books before, and I really enjoyed them. This book follows Charlie, who gets a ride with a guy named Josh. Both of them are making the long-haul trip to Ohio. Charlie is feeling really sorrowful and guilty because her best friend was one of the victims of the murderer known as the Campus Killer. And Josh is traveling to go take care of his father, or so he says. See, Charlie is pretty sure that this guy is suspicious and might be the campus killer himself. I absolutely love the idea that this thriller is going to be contained to a car. I just think that is such a wild and interesting concept. I can't wait to read this book. The final mystery thriller I want to share with you guys is The Hunting Wives. This book follows a woman named Sophie who left behind her busy city life for a quiet rural living with her husband and son. But Sophie is bored with this life already. She doesn't like it at all, until she meets a socialite in the neighborhood. The woman's name is Margot Banks, and Sophie becomes absolutely enthralled and obsessed with her and all of her friends. She follows them to extravagant parties, she goes shooting with them, and then one day a teenage girl's body is found in the woods where this club will often meet. And suddenly, Sophie is caught up in a murder investigation. So now we are going to tackle the adult romance portion of this video, and the first book I want to talk about is The Heart Principle. This is the long-awaited, long-anticipated third book in the Kiss Quotient trilogy. And this book is focused on Kwon, who I have been waiting to learn more about for so long. Kwon has always been dismissed as this playboy type, even though he really isn't. And now that he's the CEO of an up-and-coming business, a lot of girls are turning to him and giving him a second look. And one of those girls is Camilla, a girl who rejected him once before, who he still has some interest in. And then we have our female lead, Anna, who has always sort of dismissed Kwon and said that she doesn't like him, but in reality, she really does. But Anna is Camilla's older sister, and so she doesn't really think she has a chance either way. Now, Camilla is actually engaged, and in order to make sure that Kwon doesn't ruin her engagement, Anna is trying to overcome her anxieties and her OCD to seduce him. She also is trying to make sure that he doesn't ruin a really important business deal at the same time. I'm so glad that Helen Hoang is back. I cannot wait for this book. I cannot wait to learn more about Kwon. I have been on the edge of my seat waiting for this book for so long. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is also a sequel, The Intimacy Experiment. This is a sequel to The Roommate, but it can also be read as a standalone novel as well. It follows Naomi Grant, who is a world-renowned porn star. And Naomi wants to add a guest lecturer to her resume, but unfortunately, a lot of colleges and universities just don't want to invite her to their campuses. And then we have Ethan, who has recently become a rabbi. He's been hired by the board to get newer, younger people into the synagogue. And the board says he has 3 months to achieve this goal, or his synagogue is going to be closed down. So Naomi and Ethan join forces, and they decide to create an entire seminar all focused on modern romance and intimacy. And of course, along the way, they develop some feelings for each other. The next book is To Love and to Loathe, and anyone who knows me knows I love a good period romance, and that's exactly what I'm getting here. Diana and Jeremy are well-known rivals within English high society. They're constantly arguing and bickering back and forth. And one day, they make a bet with one another. Jeremy will have to marry someone by the end of the year, or Diana will give him 100 pounds. Now, Jeremy shows up at Diana's door and has another proposition. Now, he was apparently told by someone that he was not so great in bed, and he wants to practice with someone that he knows will tell him the truth, and that is Diana. He says that they should have an affair with one another, he'll get his practice in, and she can shoo off all these other men who want to marry her. Diana thinks that in doing this will help her win their original bet. So of course, she agrees. And then, of course, those sneaky little feelings come up and bite them both in the butt. The next book I want to talk about is Honey Girl, and first of all, let me just say, absolutely stunning cover. I could look at it all day. This book follows Grace Porter, who just got her PhD, and so she goes to Las Vegas to celebrate her achievement. So Grace wakes up one day in Vegas and discovers that she drunkenly got married to a complete stranger the other night. Now, Grace has a lot of personal issues involving her father and her inability to find a job, so she decides to follow her new wife and whisk off to New York and ignore all of her problems in the process. I absolutely love this concept. I'm sure I'll love the execution. I cannot wait to read this book. I want it now. No, you know what? I want it yesterday. The next book on this list is Serena Singh Flips the Script. Now, Serena is a woman in her mid-30s, and she doesn't really want any kind of domestic family life for herself. She doesn't see herself ever getting married, and she doesn't want kids. But her family absolutely refuses to accept her decision. And with her younger sister getting married, the pressure keeps building. Now, Serena has gone many years believing that she should only rely on herself, so she's kind of closed herself off to any kind of close relationship with other people. But then things start to change when she opens herself up to new friendships, to her old family members, and even to her ex-boyfriend who shows up again. The final romance I want to share with you all is The Ex-Talk, and I was actually lucky enough to get an arc of this book. This book follows Shay, who has been working at her Seattle Public Broadcasting Radio for many years now, and she is constantly butting heads with the new hire, Dominic. The radio station is struggling a bit, and so Shay proposes an idea that her boss really likes. Shay proposes the idea of a segment called The Ex-Talk, in which two exes will get on the air and they'll give dating advice to people. Her boss actually suggests that Dominic and Shay should host the first segment, and they become a sensation. Everyone all over Seattle is listening to these two and eating them up. Now, of course, they're pretending to be exes in this scenario, and things start to get complicated when they start to actually have feelings for each other. Who would have thunk it? So this final category is honestly a bunch of genres mixed together: general fiction, historical fiction, literary fiction, all the adult fictions. The first book I want to talk about is Morningside Heights. This book follows Prue, who recently graduated from Yale and moves to New York to sort of make her mark on the city. And when she's there, she ends up falling for her Shakespeare professor, and they get married. After 3 decades together, something is wrong with her husband, Spence. He can't concentrate, he falls asleep all the time, and Prue is really struggling to take care of him. Prue is also feeling very lonely because none of her children are around to help. And then she meets a man, and the possibility of a new romance springs up. But then Spence's son from his first marriage comes back into their lives. And it seems like he might be the very person Spence needs to get out of this rut he's in. The next book is categorized as historical fiction, and it is called Wild Women and the Blues. This book follows 2 separate characters in 2 different timelines. We follow a young black woman named Honoree who is living in Chicago in the 1920s, and she wants to be a dancer at the renowned Dreamland Cafe. She does very well at the club and starts to socialize and become part of the inner circles of all these celebrities. Decades later, in 2015, a young film student named Sawyer is by Honoree's side as she's dying. Now, he thinks that she is the key to discovering some hidden information that he needs for his research on the filmmaker Oscar Micheaux. But the things that Honoree reveals to Sawyer is not at all what he expected, and is in fact absolutely shocking to him. The next fiction book I can't wait to pick up is The Tiger Mom's Tale. This book follows Lexa Thomas, who feels like she doesn't fit in with her white family or her Taiwanese family, and every single time that she's gone to Taiwan, she feels out of place. But then Lexa's father unexpectedly dies, and now she is put in charge of his household back in Taiwan. So it has become her responsibility to take care of his family, and if she doesn't return to Taiwan to help them, they may lose their home. So Lexa returns, and while she's there, she has to confront the person that first made her run away from Taiwan and made her never want to return. Another book I have on my radar is The Prophets, and this is a love story between two enslaved men. Isaiah and Samuel are deeply in love and absolutely devoted to one another, and they both are slaves on a plantation together. But when a fellow slave starts to teach and preach the gospel, Isaiah and Samuel's relationship is seen as sinful and a threat to everyone. The last book on this list, the final one I want to talk to you guys about, is called Detransition Baby. This book follows Reese and Amy, who are very happy in their life. The only thing that they feel is missing is a child. But then Amy decides to detransition and becomes Ames, and Reese is thrown for a loop. And now Reese has gone down this spiral of sleeping with married men to make herself feel less lonely. Now Ames is absolutely devastated that he lost this relationship with Reese, and he really wants to get her back. And then his boss, who he is sleeping with, named Katrina, comes to him and says that she's pregnant, but doesn't want to keep the baby. And Ames starts to think that maybe they could form some kind of unconventional family and he could get Reese back. So there you have it, you guys, 35 books that I cannot wait to read in 2021. I'm sure that there are so many more that I could have added to this list, but I don't want to keep you guys here forever. I would love to know what books you all are looking forward to reading in the upcoming year, so go ahead and leave your lists in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video. Bye!